the last class we had. The last class we had discussed, finished our discussion with elements of literature, and in particular, I had used a poem to illustrate how these elements of literature present in different genres and alternate genres of literature, especially poetry. So the goal of that class was to show us that these elements of literature actually So today we'll be taking on the literary devices. There are quite many, so they will be split into several sessions, and today I hope to cover as many as 5 or 6, maybe 5 literary devices, and we will get to understand these devices, know what literary devices are, understand these, and know them well enough to identify them in any given work. So our conversation today is not restricted to prose drama or conversations with regards to then is of trying to make literal meanings that they have. So give literature to give written more than literal meanings. It's a way to make literature more entertaining. You're looking to make the work more entertaining and apply across board more than it would if it was just a literal meaning. So literary devices aim to establish relationships between more than one subject. So literary devices actually are looking to encourage the reader to process and interpret in more ways than one. I've already mentioned this when I said that the goal is to make sure that the reader sees more than what is in front of them, that they have the tools to think about what they're reading and then interpret it in more than one way. So they create connection through layers of sound, sense, emotion, narrative, and ultimately the meaning supersedes what the literary definition or literal details is providing. So, and I guess this brings me to introduce how these literary devices work. Essentially, they are ways for you to sense or to connect with the literature in more ways than one. Like, so instead of just reading one sentence in one way, you could feel the sentence, you can hear the sentence, you can see the sentence that is being given by the sentence. So on that note, I will dive into first literary devices we're examining today, which is simile. So simile is a direct connection, a direct correlation or comparison of two things, or at least two. So simile is, first of all, we have to understand that it is a comparison. It's drawing connection through comparison. Right. So it's not just that you're drawing comparison between two things, because there are more than one way to draw comparisons or connect things. You have the direct and indirect method. So simile is a direct means of drawing correlation or comparisons between two things. Now, how does this play out? Like usually, what does this look like in conversations or in literature? So simile is a way to help you interpret things in more than one way by making you think of another thing. So when I say that Sunday is as let me stop using Sunday. I see a rose in the class. So let me say Rose is as fine as Abanidagero, or Rose is Abanidagero. that direct comparison is that Rose is Urban Dagero. And in this context, I'm not saying that Rose is in all shapes, form, or context the same person as Urban Dagero. I am merely drawing comparison to the fact that Rose is as fine as Urban Dagero, that Rose is as beautiful as Urban Dagero. Okay, essentially, similar is drawing comparison, is drawing connection by comparison. So it's saying A exists, B exists, A is like B, A is B. So that is similar. Similar jumps through the hoop of telling you what A is like, what B is like, and that this A is like B, and then it just jumps right to telling you that A is B. So you have to draw the inference that A is B in the sense that A is like B in this way. So let me give you another example. So there's a poem, one of the assigned poems that you're supposed to be reading for your WAEC for this current section now is Black Woman by Leopold Sédar Senghor. So I will read two lines from the first stanza. The line is like, clothed with your color, which is life, with your form, which is beauty. Let me say that again. Clothed with your color, which is life, and your form, which is beauty. Essentially, maybe I would hope that you can read this poem after the class. Maybe it should be your take-home assignment to read this poem, because you're going to be using this poem to extrapolate or to explain the other literary devices that we'll be meeting in the next class too. But the poem is basically about the Black woman and the fineness of the Black woman, description of the Black woman and what the Black woman is about, is like. So this particular line that I just read, which is clothed with your color, which is life, with your form, which is beauty, is basically saying that the Black woman's color is life. It is not saying that Black woman color is like life. It's saying that Black woman color is life. So if you take this phrase literally, you go off with the meaning, with the idea that Black women are life, that this particular Black woman that is being described in the poem is life. That if you find a Black woman, you have found life, and this is what life looks like. But that is not what the poet has in mind in this particular poem. They are looking to make you think of the color of the Black woman, think of what life is like, and then interpose the meaning of life to the color of the Black woman. That is essentially what similar does. So similar is forcing the reader, is compelling the reader to interpret A as B in the way that it exhibits certain characteristics. So in this poem, this phrase that Black woman, the color of Black woman, clothed with your color, which is life. It is basically saying that the color of Black woman is life, that it is the color of life forms. So if you read the poem, you get the idea that this is a reference to the earth, how the soil can be black in certain areas, how the skin, how certain life forms exhibit the shade of skin that Black women possess. Essentially, it's saying that, oh, this is a life force. But this is a meaning that you have to extrapolate from the meaning of life and then apply it to Black, to the color of the Black woman. I hope it's making sense so far. Similar is direct contrast, direct connection using comparison. Another example of similar is saying that, who else am I going to use? I don't know who else is in the class. Okay, maybe if I say something like Joshua is a cat. This will require you to identify what a cat is like, to identify the characteristics or the things that cats are popularly known for. Are they feet? In what sense is this being used in a particular literature you're reading? That's how I now interpret or use the literary devices of similar. So when I say that Joshua is a cat and I'm making a conversation about running or I'm making a conversation about sports, it should give it inference that I mean that Joseph is agile, that Joseph is quick on his feet. That's similar. So Joseph is a cat is saying Joseph is like a cat, or Joseph is like a cat. I hope this is making sense. So to round up this literary device, similar is a literary device that uses comparison. However, this comparison is done through direct comparison, making connections through direct comparison. Now, another literary device that is in the same bracket or in the same sphere as metaphor is as metaphor, because what I just described now is metaphor. Sorry. So another literary device is similar. Similar is indirect comparison. Indirect comparison. So metaphor is a direct comparison in the sense that it's metaphor. Similar is saying something is like something. Metaphor is saying something is something, A is big. Similar is saying A is like B. So when I say Joshua is like a cat, that is a similar. It is not direct. I'm not saying directly that Joshua is a cat. I'm saying that Joshua is like a cat. And then you get the context of how I mean that Joshua is a cat. If I say that Adama is a beauty, it's direct. But if I say Adama is like a beauty, or Adama is like a beauty queen, that is more indirect. You have to draw the reference or the inference more indirectly than you would from a metaphorical statement. So like an example of similar in the poem Black Woman, which I said I will be referencing throughout the class, is a line in the second stanza, I think, and it says, "And your beauty strikes me to the heart like the flash of an eagle." So to understand this statement, you have to imagine what the flash of an eagle is like, and then you now superimpose that to the beauty of the Black woman being described in this poem. So it is saying that the beauty of the Black woman is affecting the narrator in the way that a flash of an eagle would affect him. A more simple illustration of use of simile is saying that Michael is like an elephant. Then in the context I use it would mean that, oh, Michael is as fat or as big as an elephant. If you say the sun is like an orange, the inference could mean that the sun is as round or has the color of an orange. Essentially, the key identifying factor is to understand or to identify if there's a direct connection to comparison or if there's an indirect connection to comparison. I don't know if you're following so far, but yeah. If you have any question, please, you can raise your hand and ask. Otherwise, I'll keep moving on. Okay. So far we have discussed simile and metaphor. However, there are two. Well, I can't hear you. Are you saying something? Okay, let's move on. There are two identifying factors. There are two factors that we should recognize in the use of simile and metaphor, which are the vehicle and the tenor. So the tenor is basically the subject, the thing that is aimed to be described, or the thing aimed to be explained. That is the tenor. Let me restate that. So the tenor is the subject of the sentence, the subject of the literary work being examined in this case. So that is a tenor. The vehicle, on the other hand, is the object, the thing that is used to describe the tenor, the thing that is used to explain the tenor. That is a vehicle. So let me use an example. In the example in the illustration I gave, where I said that Joshua is a cat. Joshua, in this case, is our tenor because it's the subject of the conversation. We are describing Joshua. We're talking about Joshua. The cat, on the other hand, is the vehicle because it is the means or is the way that I'm describing Joshua. To help maybe to see it and to understand it better, or to remember more clearly, we shouldn't use ten and vehicle, although these are the ascribed or the understood words. We could use the object and then the glass, the eyeglasses. So the eyeglass is the way you see the subject, and then the subject is existing on its own, and then you put it on these glasses will help you see this subject in the way that the author or the playwright or the poet has described it. So with an understanding of tenor factor, and then the vehicle, anybody can create a similar or metaphorical statement. So you can use similar metaphorical statements are usually created using concept words and on one hand, connector, something that is connecting them, depending on whether you're using whether it's a similar metaphor that you are intending to use. And then you now have the vehicle, which is the object of the sentence. So, for example, I could say happiness, which is. So, flowing water in this context is the vehicle or the object. Again, let me repeat my example. So, concept words, connector, concept words, connector, and then the vehicle. The concept word in my illustration would be happiness. And then the connector is light. And then the vehicle is flowing water. So if I say the listener would have to think of what a flowing water is like, and then sort of have to impose the meaning of flowing water, and then use it in context of happiness, kind of understand what happiness is about. So when I say happiness is like flowing water, it basically means that happiness is something that flows. Happiness is something that is not stagnant. It doesn't stay in one place. It flows, comes and goes, and it's the flow that you enjoy it. Again, I'm getting philosophical. That's essentially the point. In this way, you can create several metaphorical or similar statements. You can have things like anger is a burning fire. Joy is like a blooming flower. Hunger is limitless, but understanding how similar metaphorical sentences work with tenure, words, and then vehicles will help you create and then identify these literary devices in literature texts. The next literary devices device we'll be looking at is imagery. Imagery is sort of like the principal literary device, but it's also sort of like one of the hardest to describe, because in describing imagery, you are basically going to be touching on almost every other thing because it's sort of like connected to it. The imagery is the way that a literature work presents to the reader. It is the way that the literature work is imagined or envisioned or received by the reader or the receptor. So reading Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, you have to over time come to imagine what Okonkwo's village looks like. You imagine what Okonkwo looks like. At some point, it was described in the first chapter. You have to imagine what his father looked like as a frail man who is skinny. You sort of like imagery is basically how a literature work is imagined, envisioned, or seen by the reader or the person receiving the work. Now, it is the use of figurative words in description, and it could involve or lead to the interpretation of works in sight, sound, emotions, feelings, how they are felt, like how they are seen, how they are even tastes. All these could be incorporated in imagery. So, for example, if let me do a couple of sentences of short work, flash fiction work that should incorporate imagery. I come from the city of Enugu. It is a land filled with so many hills and rocks that we do not want for things to climb. Hiking is a splendid engagement as adventure seekers can find any given rock at any given time, any given day. So if my short description has done anything, it should help you get the idea that Enugu is a very hilly city, that Enugu is a very rocky place, that we have a lot of rocks, a lot of hills around. So this is what imagery is about. It is aimed at getting the reader, aimed at getting the person receiving the literary work to imagine what the work looks like, to sort of like see the work, sort of envision the work, to be able to put themselves and image themselves in the work. It is through imagery that you can imagine what Game of Thrones. Sir, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to proceed on the belief that you can hear me. I hope so. I'm just concerned I'm not. I keep getting this black screen. Most like I'm cut off. But yeah, so imagery is how we can imagine what the world in Game of Thrones looks like. It's how we can imagine what Harry Potter setting looks like. It's basically imagery that helps us get the setting of the literature work. So when we read Things Fall Apart, it's imagery that helps us understand what homomorphia looks like. When we read Americana by Chimamanda Adichie, it helps us understand what America and Lagos sort of looks like from the perception of the characters. When we read 50 Shades of Grey, it's sort of like to understand the places where these things are set. But it's not just about the setting. Imagery also helps us understand or imagine what the characters look like. So it is through imagery that you can think, oh, Okonkwo had a full beard, Okonkwo had an afro hair, Okonkwo had a pot belly, Okonkwo had a dark skin, because as you are reading the words in the literature work, as you are experiencing the work in the literature work, you sort of like can imagine what the characters or what the story setting looks like. I hope that makes sense. So yes, the next literary device that we look at is symbolism. So symbolism is something that I think it has sort of like developed almost on its own, and it's almost a different brand. It's actually a course of study. It's a course of study. I don't know how many of us have read Dan Brown's work, which is heavily reliant on the character called Robert Landon, who is, amongst other things, a symbol professor. Like he's a professor that is majors in symbols and symbolism and stuff like that. So essentially, symbolism is the combination of ideas presented in metaphor and imagery. So it allows for manipulation of concepts and ideas. Essentially, symbolism is using one thing to show you another. It's almost like magic. It's almost like how you can say, oh, look at this coin. I'm going to do this to this coin and it will become a piece of paper. And then the thing is done to the coin and it becomes a piece of paper. Essentially, symbolism, it's about symbolism is about presenting one thing and then making that one thing look like another thing. So, for example, in the Maya Angelou poem we read in the last class about the caged bird, the cage, as described, it wasn't even described. The cage as referred to or inferenced from the second stanza of that poem, is symbolical for captivity. It's a symbolism for racism. It's a symbolism for the captivity that Black people experience in America. The symbolism is a way for writers, for authors, for playwrights, for poets to give you an idea of something without saying that thing, which is why it's described as a tool combining imagery and metaphor. So essentially, symbolism is saying, look at this. This is what this looks like. And then looking at what this looks like, you think of several other things. You think of, oh, this looks like this looks like this looks like this. So in Buchemechetas, I hate that I'm making reference to this, even though it's not a text that's assigned for this course, and it's not very boring. Buchemechetas are joys of motherhood. You could see how in several times throughout the book, she used the characters dwelling, where they are living, and their food conditions as symbols to illustrate their social status. It was used as symbols to show what the society was like. So yes, symbolism is important in literature as it helps you understand things in ways that the author is not direct with. So if, for example, you are reading a literature work and then you come across a character that is wearing a very white robe, a very royal and regalia, a very royal white regalia, wearing a long pointy hat, donning a long lapel on his neck, walking with a gold staff, and walking slowly and stuff like that. You can almost always imagine a Reverend Father or a Pope, a bishop or a Pope. If you are reading a literature work and then you come across a character that is described as wearing a suit, a black suit, a white shirt, a black gown atop the white shirt, a brown horse wig of any version or design, you get to imagine a lawyer. The symbolism is basically using an idea of one thing to show another. A gown and a wig, and they're carrying a file or they're carrying a wreath. You can sort of like get the idea that this person is a lawyer, regardless of whether it is specifically mentioned in the literature work or not. You get the idea that this is a lawyer. So yes, I hope that is clarification on symbolism. The next literary device that I wish to discuss today is personification. And I think this is the one that we'll probably be more familiar with. I mean, considering how it is repeated in literature and it is impactful in the way that it is not so subtle. So personification is the ascription of human-like traits to non-humans. So let me tell that again. So personification is the ascription of human-like traits to non-humans. So if I describe, let me give you a sentence. Let me give a sentence. So the horseshoe clamored like Rita's stomach. Let me do that again. The horseshoe clamored floor like Rita's stomach. It gives you the idea that Rita's stomach makes a sound or rumbles in a particular way, and horseshoes are rumbling in the same way that Rita's stomach stuff does. Let me use another one. The door creaked. No. The door closed slowly like my grandfather walking towards the sitting room. I think this one is okay. Yes. So another example: the door closed slowly like my grandfather walking towards the sitting room. So this would essentially make you imagine what my grandfather looks like when he's walking, and with your imagination of how slowly he walks, you now superimpose that on a door, which is not animate, which doesn't work. I mean, a door doesn't work for any given reason at no point in time. At no point in time does work. So yes,
Michael,
that's an illustration of personification. Another illustration. Yeah.
Yeah, you have 8 minutes more.
I can hear you. Okay, it's fine. I'm on the last one. Let me just wind up. Thank you. So yes, running up with personification. Another example is saying that, oh, my backpack is as black as Sunday's skin. Sorry, Sunday. But essentially, like, this should give the listener or the reader the idea that, oh, Sunday's skin is black. My backpack is black like Sunday's skin, so it should be as the same complexion as Sunday's skin. So essentially, personification is superimposing the traits or elements of humans to another thing, which is not animate, so an inanimate object. So that's basically what personification is about. So I don't know if at this point there are any questions or what you're taking so far before I summarize the session and close for today. If there are any questions, I'm willing to take them before our time runs out.
Hello, sir.
Okay. Hi, Joshua.
Yes, sir. Is the literary device simile? Is there any way of comparing them apart from the use of like?
Is there any way of what?
Of the indirect comparison.
Yes.
Apart from the use of like.
Okay, yes, you can do. Okay, let me take that again. Thank you for asking. I think maybe because I took them first, there was a somewhat confusion there. So, like I said, comparisons come in two ways, which is similar and metaphor. So similar is not just like, similar also uses acts. So similar, this statement, let me give you an example of a statement that is similar. Michael is as black as charcoal. So as here is a comparison. Michael walks as slow as my grandfather. As here is slow, and then grandfather is the vehicle and Michael is the tenure. The elephant is as fat as the small elephant is as fat as a cow. The elephant here is the tenor or the object, as is the comparison, and then the cow is the vehicle. So it's not just like, you can use like, you can use as. So similar is usually restricted to these two, which is as and like, okay? However, you don't have to use as and like alone to make comparisons, which is where metaphors come in. So as and like are used in statements that are similar, but when you're doing a metaphorical statement, you don't use either. So instead of saying that Michael walks like my grandfather, or Michael walks as slowly as my grandfather, you could say Michael is my grandfather. That's, you give it the idea that, oh, Michael probably walks like his grandfather, or Michael looks like his grandfather, or that is also comparison. So if instead of saying that Sunday is as rich as Elon Musk, or saying that Sunday is like Elon Musk, that's similar. These two statements are similar. However, if I now say Sunday is Elon Musk, that is metaphorical in the sense that I am being direct. This comparison now is direct. So to go back to what I said before, when we are starting out the session, comparison could be direct or indirect. If it is direct, it is metaphor. If the comparison is indirect, it is a similar. Just, I don't know if that answers your question. So yes, you don't have to use just like, you can use as, but that is similar, but understand that there are two ways of doing comparisons: through metaphor, one, and then through similar, two ways of doing comparisons in literature works. I don't know if that answers the question, Joshua. Is Joshua still here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Joshua. I don't know if there's another question. Did someone say something? Okay. On the answer or no question, any other question? I think someone is saying something. I just can't hear you. You can drop it in the chat box. You can drop it in the chat box, and I'll try to respond as quickly as I can before our time ends. However, if after the class anybody has any questions, they can relay it almost relay it to Sunday, and he wrapped it to me, and I'll give you a response before the next session. I'll handle it when we start our next session the next time. So before I close for the day, let me summarize what we did today. Today we introduced literary devices. We gave a short understanding of what literary devices are and what they do in literary works. And then we now identified 5 literary devices and tried to explain them. We have met metaphor, which I described not similar. Sunday, I can hear you speak, but I just can't hear what you're saying. Like, I know you're speaking, but I just can't hear what you're saying. Maybe you should type it. I think you should just type. Send it to me on WhatsApp, and we can handle it later.
I think it's rules. Well, I believe if she still wants to add the question, she will send it through the WhatsApp page.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And I don't know if you have, maybe after the class, you can also give them assignments if you have any for them. Preferably,
yes,
preferably okay, in an objective format, if that will work for you.
My assignments are not going to take that form for now. I think after you provide it for you.
Okay then. Continue with the summary of the class then.
You can read most of this work that we like. Yes. So we discussed metaphor, similarity, comparison, indirect and direct comparison, and then we also described. We also met imagery. We also discussed personification. We also discussed symbolism. So we have discussed these 5 devices. Next Sunday we will continue. However, I would expect that we should please read the poem Black Woman by Leopold Shermer. We'll be discussing it in detail next class as we meet more literary devices. Thank you very much. Thank you for the class. I hope to see you guys next time.